Well, hello, folks. I'm L.A. Little, and this is your daily NeoTA wrap. We take a look at these markets, and we do it from a neoclassical perspective. Each time we ask ourselves what happened today, and what does it tell us about the coming ones. I do the show 4 times a week, Monday through Thursday, broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, archived on YouTube. It's available there under the channel L.A. Little. Subscribe to it. Get updates. You can watch it any place, anytime, anywhere, which makes it nice and convenient. That's the ideal, of course. As far as the markets, well, we came into today knowing that the European Union was going to be the big deal. And, I think I was pretty clear last night saying that what I would be looking for is some sort of selling if Draghi did not deliver. In other words, if he did not make any concrete type promises that the ECB was going to do quantitative easing, in other words, buying sovereign debt, that these markets would probably sell off. Well, Draghi came out. He did not make concrete guarantees, and these markets sold off. Oh, they just didn't sell off very much, though, did they? Folks, there's no way to read this but bullish. If you can't pull back any more than this on what should have been a decent day down off that news, then this market is simply telling you it does not want to go down. I don't care what the news is. The news flow cannot kill this market. Hasn't been able to and still isn't able to. And that's the story. That's the bottom line. You can even see it here where your bonds lift up at a good pace, right? Almost, what is that? Almost 1%, full point. But still, no sell-off really. And if you consider the fact that oil was down again, XLE was under pressure again, and you can only take 2 points off the S&P. I don't know what else to say. The market doesn't want to go down, folks, and I think that's the way you have to just view this thing. It hangs at the highs, even with Draghi telling us that he's not going to do anything, or at least not yet, right? I mean, now, I've got to say, he did say, multiple times that they're going to, they have all options on the table in terms of buying all kinds of things with the exception of gold. He specifically said that. And they're going to do that at the next meeting. Okay, so, it's the typical Draghi thing. Drag it out, drag it out, drag it out. If you go back and you look at the charts of the U.S., the U.K., Japan, China, any of the central banks, right, the big ones, they all have increased their balance sheets. Compare that to the ECB, where they've basically cut theirs. I don't know how much percentage-wise, but a decent percentage, 30, 40%. So their balance sheet has been shrinking. Everybody else has been expanding. That's why Europe finds itself in the situation it is. And I'm not saying that QE is good. I'm just simply saying that if everybody on the block is going to cheat, if you don't cheat, you're probably going to lose. That doesn't make cheating right. It just makes it much harder for those who don't. And that really is what it's all about right now. So that's the way it is. S&P's goes up, tests a new high, has less volume, basically does a test failure at the highs, but you could also look at that volume on the downside. 2062 coming back into 2068, coming back into this one, doesn't have the volume. It looks to me like this is going to try to test higher. Dow Jones, same sort of setup. Dow Jones goes up, tests a new high. Also tests back down into these bars with less volume. Looks like it wants to go higher. Now, if we go over to the NASDAQ, The NASDAQ actually failed on the breakdown bar. Top of the bar, 47.82. You get up to 47.85, you close underneath it at 47.69. So the NASDAQ fails into the top of the bar. The NDX, and I'm talking about the breakdown bar, the NDX couldn't get there. Top of it's 43.32, got to 43.27. So given the SPX, given the composite, testing up there and can test again, I wouldn't be surprised to see the NDX at least try to test, right? 43.32. You got the employment numbers tomorrow, and unless they're a huge miss or a huge, hit, big numbers or very small numbers in terms of unemployment or employed, depending on how you look at it, it's the employment report, then I doubt this market's going to do anything but what it has been doing. It's just hang and grind. So NDX, I wouldn't be surprised to see it try to test top. Russell, now the Russell's gone up, it's tested. It broke the high from over here. It's still testing on a weekly. We looked at this last night, still testing here, this high, can't get over it. And at some point, you either break back down, right? Can't get over this guy. Either some point you break back down, or you break out. And right now, it's tried to break out twice, it's tried to break down twice. Neither one's stuck. I'm sure one of them's going to stick pretty soon, and when it does, that's going to be a pretty good tell, because that's going to tell you, that the weakest index either can't cut the mustard or is definitely starting to. And if it starts to, then that to me is a pretty good signal that this market's going to just push on up into the end of the year. So if I look at the sectors, I'm going to just highlight two or three. You actually had an over-under here in the IBB, so the biotechs go over, come back under. The IYT's coming back up to the top of that breakdown bar. Is going to test it probably tomorrow. The SOX did a doji, but it got over the high and stayed over it. The XLE, and we'll look at the USO here in a minute, but the XLE looks to me like it is trying to put in a bottom. Now this is different because this is the large cap integrated mostly. It has some SLB, HAL in it, right? The drillers and service companies. But you can see this low is a high volume low. It came down, it tested into the bar next to it, couldn't get into it, right? Doesn't have the volume. Little bounce up, back down. This looks to me like it's trying to set up some sort of a little ABCD structure back to the top side to get back in here and do a retest regen on these lows. So this is setting up pretty nicely for a push back up. If it comes in a little bit deeper, right, then the push isn't going to be as big, and then that retest regen off of this low is probably going to have a good shot at holding and trying to send it lower on a larger ABCD structure down. But we'll just have to watch and see how it plays out. But right now it does look to me like it is going to bounce and bounce more. That's going to help the SPX if it does, and actually help everything, because the psychology, if you look at any of the articles being written, the talk shows that are being held, I don't listen to TV, but I assume they're talking about it. You've got people on both sides, one saying, hey, it's great, one saying it's horrible. And to me, the only way it's horrible if it's a fast, uncontrolled move, because anything that lowers the price of energy, which ripples through everything, makes everything cheaper to produce, to buy, puts money in people's pockets, so forth. So I can't, I'm not in the camp that is bad. That's good. What's bad is if it just uncontrollably falls out of bed, right? And the panic situation sets in, and people that are leveraged have to start throwing stuff out the window, the big players. So that's oil, financials, big sector, big strong sector, big important sector, new highs. The XLY hanging at the highs, and those are the main things. So Sectors, to me, I don't see but one or two that are struggling. The rest of them still looking pretty good. So kind of hard to look at that and say there's anything bad there. Indexes, if anything, one could say they're mixed, but they look like they have a bias to test higher again tomorrow. If I go over to Asia, Asia itself is really starting to move. I look at Taiwan, Taipei, another high volume coming into this guy. Japan, same thing, stretching higher. The big move, though, is reserved for Hong Kong. If I look at Chinese shares, mainland, new highs, folks, and if you bring over the weeklies, it's over the highs here. It's testing that other high probably tonight. Volume swelling. Then if I bring in the monthly, the picture looks a little bit different. It's going after this high. 11,638 is the number. So we'll see how it behaves as it gets up towards that number. But definitely, the Chinese market feeling the effects of the easing that has taken place. You had the rate cut last week, and you had 3 days now that the central bank has not drained liquidity, which is they're not pulling money out of the system, so that puts more money into people's pockets there. And I don't mean people, but it juices the system. And so the Chinese are definitely easing and trying to ease, and the market's showing that. If we skip over to Europe, where France and Germany got hit off the ECB decision to do nothing, so they come off, volume expands a little bit, they get into the big bar up, and so what this suggests to me is that these guys are going to come back and do a retest, regenerate off this swing point high. So, when I sum this up, it's not that far away. It's coming back after more than 6 bars on a breakout, so you would expect it to get bought right towards the top. And so that, even though it looks bad tonight, if the volume doesn't expand much more, I'd expect more than likely, and I'll draw out the zone here that I expect it to get bought in, is right there. And so I would think that the bottom of this bar, that top of that swing point high, that's where you're going to see the money come running back in here. That's on the CACs. If we look at the DAX, on the DAX you got the same sort of situation, a little bit different here in that this one ran up a lot farther, but here you have the breakout on this swing point high. So if I draw that one in, we got it from there to there. You can see it's already into it. Now look at this one. This one's not more than 6 bars. So what does that tell me? I suspect it's going to come deeper. There's 2 swing point highs down here. That's also the bottom of this bar. I wouldn't be surprised to see it, maybe it gets support here at the first one, gets a bounce, but eventually drifts back into here until we get farther along the curve and we find out what the ECB is really going to do. So those two, not bad, not good, not bad. And actually, if we bring over the German DAX weekly, that low there is 95.88. That's the retest regen on it. And 95.88 gets you back into this big bar. So those all make sense to me. I would think somewhere in that 9,600 area is probably where it's going to try to travel to. So Europe getting a push back now after a big run. Money starts shifting to Asia. Money's still hanging here in the U.S. So, net still looks okay. I don't see anything wrong with it. And if I finally walk over to the ox markets, I don't see anything wrong here either because, with the move today with the ECB, that put juice into the FXE, and that pushed the dollar back down. So if anything, the dollar is crawling higher, not running. I think that's a good situation. I was talking about oil earlier. If we look at the oil market here, this looks to me, you got this big volume low. Tomorrow's Friday. It looks to me like it's going to test into that low. I don't see it having a volume. If that's the case, I think you're probably going to see the bounce here finally. And I don't know that it will come tomorrow, but it does look like the bounce is setting up. I've been running a series all week about oil stocks on the trading videos. Which stocks are being hurt, which are being helped. if you if you want something that's got volatility and you're got the time and willing to spend the effort, there are stocks that are going to benefit from what is likely going to be a spike back up. And you have already had some of them do it. For example, if I look at one of the large refiners, which I've talked about already, Valero, comes down, right, breaks some swing points, everybody gets all worried. What do? The next 3 days, you're back at the highs. I mean, that's just the way it's working. One that's not worked quite as well, PSX, which is Phillips 66 refiner. They got hit. They bounced. They actually, from a bounce perspective, if you count something near the low, it's up 6% or so, but not nearly the gusto you see elsewhere. And so when you're looking at these, and you got a choice, do you want to buy this or you want to buy Valero on the next dip? If you get one, I want to buy Valero. I mean, it's showing me it's stronger. It's showing me the money wants to come into it, whereas here, the money is not nearly as willing to do so. So that looks like it wants to try to trade higher, not those, but oil itself, and that's going to help those stocks. TLT, the bonds. Bonds come down, they test in. We were talking about this this week. They test into the retest regen off this high, hold right there. They don't even get to the bottom. They're back up. They close the gap today. I don't know that it's going to make it back to the top, but what this tells me is that they are going to slowly work their way back up to that high. And so if you want something that's kind of a hedge to your portfolio without a lot of risk, bonds are not a bad place to be looking, at least on the long end of the curve. And then we go to the FXE, and we can see here, just like the dollar, because this is 50% of the dollar index, just like the dollar spiked down then back up, this one spiked up then back down, and that's going to be the highlight tonight. But before I move to it, let me take and just give you a synopsis here of where I think we're going. And that is, tomorrow's Friday, you got the employment numbers. Unless there's some huge miss or hit, I suspect that what you're going to see, they expect these numbers to be good, and I expect that's probably what they're going to be, and I don't think it's going to do much to these markets. So last night I talked about my gut feel was that Draghi wouldn't deliver, we'd probably get some selling. Well, he didn't deliver, we did get some selling, but it didn't hold. And that just, again, emphasizes how strong the market is. It keeps, when it keeps telling you that, you got to believe it. And we've talked about the fact that there's a good chance this thing can run into the end of the year, and it's starting to look that way to me. So I expect this thing to probably just grind higher. We're getting far enough out. If you pull over the calendar, look at your calendar, you've only got about, one more week of real trading. And then it's going to go in holiday mode, folks. So you probably got, I'm looking at the calendar now, it's got 5, 6, 7, got about 8 more days of real trading, and then it's the the low volume, nobody cares, just hold it up, and push it up into the end of the year, get your bonuses. So unless this market finds a reason to sell down tomorrow or early next week, I just think you got to think it's going to grind higher, and I think the probabilities are heavily in that favor at this point. Okay, so that's the way that breaks down. I want to talk about something now that, and I'm looking at the FXE, that I've said many times before. A lot of times people don't believe me. When I trade during the day, I don't even hardly watch the news. I never have TV on. Occasionally I'll pop up a live video feed of Bloomberg or something else if I really need to see something live. But most of the time, I just kind of block out what's happening, and I work on other stuff and on, research and things like that. Why? Well, because you don't need to see all the news. Matter of fact, it just kind of clutters your thinking. Last night we talked about what should happen, right? In neo trading, you think about what should happen, not what has happened as much as what should happen. And then you look at what does happen, and that tells you things. And so a while ago I was emphasizing that, market should have sold off. Well, it didn't. And if it didn't, that's telling you something. right? And if it's telling you something, then you ought to just, sit up and listen. Don't ignore what it's telling you. And I wanted to talk about the fact that you don't really need to see the news. We knew there was, we knew that there was the ECB today. We knew what should happen, right? In other words, if Draghi doesn't deliver, the FXE should spike and equities should fall. Well, here's the FXE. Draghi had his speech started up, right before the markets open. The ECB had already, said they weren't doing anything. Well, you gap up. And then what do? You just run this thing up. Why is that? Well, it's probably short covering in the currency, the Forex. And then what happens? Well, it runs as far as it can, and then it comes right back down, and then it comes back down at test. Now, notice the test, and I don't pay a huge amount of attention to this market intraday especially, but you have a huge spike down. The suggestion here to me, even on the intraday, is that this thing's going to come back and fill this gap and make new lows. What does this tell me? Without even reading the news, what does it tell me? Well, it tells me two things. One is Draghi didn't deliver. That was this. And then, even though he didn't deliver, they still believe his promises, right? They still believe QE's coming. Otherwise, why would they sell it back off, right? And that's why the equity markets are probably holding, right? Because Draghi may still deliver, right? Central banks may still grease the wheels. It's a never-ending story, and, that's the way this thing looks and trades. That spike up didn't hold. Yeah, there was some volume on it, so you can go back up and do some more testing. But as you saw intraday, most of that volume was to the downside. I expect this little island-looking bottom down here is going to find some visitation rights before too much longer, and this thing is going to work its way lower over the next month. These are not risk-free trades, but when you got trends like this, and the one that you see over here in the yen, folks, those are pretty strong trends, and it's going to take a lot to turn them. And until they stop devaluing their currencies purposefully, their currencies are going to go down. And that's what they're doing. And, it's a trade. If somebody hands you a pretty good trade, it's kind of something you should probably pay attention to and try to take. All right, I'm about out of time here. I've given you everything I got. I've given you the brain dump, so that's where we stand. Market's a lot stronger than most people think and most people want, but that's what it is. Have a great one. Tell a friend, tell two. Help me help you. I'm LA. This is and it was your daily NeoTA wrap. Have yourself a great night and a great weekend. I'll catch up with you next. Take care. Good night.